This mini-lecture considers the environmental dimensions to the first two books of the Bible, and also a trio of Psalms. Scripture helps to establish patterns of thinking that many people across the world still hold today, so it is important to get a sense of how the Bible shapes our thought patterns and attitudes towards nature. With regard to the book of Genesis, it is important to acknowledge the influence of this story throughout the Western world. A full field of painters, poets, writers, sculptors, and other artists have offered interpretations of this story of original sin, and this parable is essential to the moral foundations of Judeo-Christian society. This slide explains the two elements of the story, the primal and ancestral histories of Genesis, and the image here, which dates to about the year 1500, is by the Flemish painter Hieronymus Bosch. It is part of a triptych, or a three-part series of images that tell a story, and is literally one of hundreds of images which portray aspects of the book of Genesis. Please take a moment to look over the slide and to get a sense of the two aspects to the history told in the story of Genesis. Here are two more images of Genesis that you might be familiar with. These appear in the Sistine Chapel of Rome and were composed in the early 1500s by the Italian master painter Michelangelo. If you haven't done so yet, please read books 1 to 3 of Genesis and consider the questions posed on this slide. Think about narrative structure, the way the story is put together, gender relations, the order of creation, and the relationship between Adam and Eve, the power of the natural world as shown in the process of creation, and humankind's relationship to that world, the place of humankind in relation to nature, to each other, to the animal world, and also to God. The role of the divine, how present is God in this story? The presence of evil, how prominent is evil in this story, and what element does evil add to this story? What words define our relationship to nature? Is there any one or two words that seem to capture that attitude most powerfully? And lastly, think about what you see as the most important verse. If you're able to identify this, that probably means that you are well on the way to seeing how important this book is in terms of defining our connections to nature. Basically, I'm asking you what's important in terms of defining the relationships of humankind, firstly to God, and secondly to nature. Also, think about whether the order by which things appear in this newly created world confirms their importance within it. Even though we're not reading it in our class, it is worth noting the importance of landscape in the unfriendly environment depicted in the Old Testament book of Exodus. This book portrays the origins of God's chosen people, the Israelites, liberated by Moses from slavery in Egypt and charged to embark upon their exodus or departure through the ominous and ever dangerous wilderness to the promised land. The Israelites are shown to mature as a people around shared experiences and the enduring of common hardships and shared miracles. Exodus chapters 16 through 18 describe a crucial juncture in this process. Here the Israelites learn the strength of their covenant with God, who provides them with manna, or divine nourishment, as they continue to endure hardship and danger in their wilderness journey. Thus he confirms his willingness to protect this vulnerable people and affirms their faith in him. Here is the first of two slides which detail the journey, which historians continue to interpret and debate over. Notice the landmark and topographical references mentioned in the Exodus story that are used here to reconstruct it. Here too is another interpretation of that journey, also using geographical reference points to document the path forward to the promised land. Here are some conclusions about how the Exodus story shapes our concept of wilderness. Firstly, wilderness is both internal and external. It is a harsh, hostile space where humans struggle to survive, and also a troubled state of mind, a reflection of human cares and anxieties. It is internal characteristics of chaos and disorder, and threatens human health and communal stability. Humans experience hardship in that troubled space, but find comfort in faith, society, and community. As confirmed. Lastly, you've been linked to a quartet of Psalms which also convey attitudes about nature. Please read Psalms 8 and 33, and then consider how these brief summaries explain the relation between God, humanity, and the natural world. Psalms 104 and 148, which are also linked to on the content page, are a bit longer and a bit more vivid in terms of their idealized natural imagery. Again, a brief synopsis of each highlights the idealized harmony between humans and nature. We can also see in these instances that the psalmists are invoking pastoral imagery to depict an idealized natural world as an expression of godly benevolence and omnipresence. Here are some conclusions to consider in relation to this material. Much of our relationship to the natural world and the environment is shaped by the foundational beliefs articulated in the holy texts that define our spirituality and religious practices. Whether we're considering the Bible, the Quran, or some other holy text, we see verses and ideas that define our connection to the non-human living world. That concludes our presentation, and once again, I thank you for listening.